Welcome. This video is presented by the Nebraska Arts Council. They're the ones who administer the Nebraska Poetry Out Loud program. I am Nebraska State poet Matt Mason, and today I'm going to share everything you need to know about getting started. So, first, what is Poetry Out Loud? It's part of a national program that takes place in high schools in all 50 states. Students learn about some of the world's best poetry and select one or more poems to memorize by heart and recite out loud. It's challenging, but also a lot of fun. You find poems that say something, that are about something that's interesting to you, and those are the ones you choose and you memorize. So, one Nebraska student will go on to compete nationally next spring. So, why Poetry Out Loud? It's fun and dynamic. It introduces you to poetry. It improves reading and interpretation skills, builds public speaking skills and self-confidence. And it's poetry. As the Nebraska State poet, poetry is, of course, the greatest thing there is. So, you also, though, compete for over $50,000 in scholarships and prizes. So, the contest structure is like this. You start by choosing a poem. Find something you like, find something interesting, find something about something that you want to know more about, or, you don't think there are poems about basketball? False. You'll find some. Don't think there are poems about dancing? False. There are some. You choose a poem, and from this list of poems online, there's over 1,100 poems, and you memorize with your classmates in school for a school competition. Some schools involve a single teacher in one classroom. Others include multiple teachers in classes. So, after there's the school competition, one student from your school is chosen to advance to the state semifinals. This year, due to COVID-19, the state semifinals and the finals will be held virtually. So, in February, school champions will compete with peers from across the state. Judges will review and score video recordings of 2 poem recitations by each school champ to determine who advances to the state finals. State finals are held in early March. Judges review recitations of 3 poems by each semifinalist who advances to this competition. So, for the school competition, you need 1, maybe 2 poems. Ask your teacher, make sure. For the semifinals, you need 2 poems. And then for the finals, you need a 3rd poem. And that's it. The state champion and 1 runner-up will receive cash prizes and funds to buy books for their school library. I love that last part because as the Nebraska State poet, I've got 2 books of poetry out. There's so many books of poetry that I love that I know more people should read, so that there's money set aside for school libraries to buy books of poetry. It's the best. So, Nebraska's champion will also compete at the national finals. And at the national finals, there are more awards and school stipends given out, including $20,000 for the national champion. So, to select a poem, you first browse the poems on the website poetryoutloud.org. These are all the only poems that you can use in this competition. So go to poetryoutloud.org and you'll find over 1,100 poems, as well as information about guidelines, scoring criteria, and other resources on the website. The poems, I say there are over 1,100. They're by poets that were writing 400 years ago. They've also got poems that have been written 10 years ago or less. So you can read anything from Shakespeare to Mary Oliver, Twyla Hansen, way on back to some of the greats that you've probably already come across. You probably find some Poe, some Robert Frost, maybe some Keats, some Shelley. Look through. Find the poems you like by the poets you already know you like, or search by subject matter. Want to find poems about spring? You can do that. You can explore the selections by discovering new poets or browsing through themes like family ties, historical poems, summer poems, country poems, eerie poems, and look around for war poems, sports poems, whatever you're kind of interested in, want to know more about, or maybe find some poem about. You can find it there at poetryoutloud.org. After you've chosen a poem, you memorize it. Which I know. I am a terrible memorizer, but even I've got a number of poems. A few of my own poems are in my head. A few of other poets' poems are in my head. You pick a poem to memorize. It helps if it's one that resonates with you. If you're actually interested in what's going on in this poem and what it's about, it's easier to memorize. Make sure you understand the text. If you don't, the audience will probably not understand it well either after you recite it. So, some tips for memorizing: rewrite it several times by hand. Each time, try to write as much as you can by memory, but keep doing that over and over, and it helps form those little memory connections. Read your poem aloud before bed. Repeat it when you wake up. Repeat it as often as you can. Carry around a copy of your poem and find the times to reread or recite it. You can record yourself saying the poem. Pull out your phone, say your poem, boom. Listen to that every now and then. It helps, when you're kind of tired and don't want to do the reciting and try to say it yourself. Listen to yourself saying it. Practice with family, friends, pets, in front of a mirror. The more you say this poem, the more it'll get into your head, and it will eventually. Even if you're bad at memorizing like me, you can do it. And as you get it memorized, get it to the point where it's coming out as easy as breathing. You don't even have to, you start the poem and bam, you don't have to stop and think, what's that next line or what's coming up. Make it so that it's so ingrained in your head that not going to be any hesitation at any point. So practice it over the next couple of weeks to get ready for your school competition. Your teacher will tell you about your school's specific timeline, as well as whether you need to prepare 1 or 2 poems for your classroom and your school competitions. The schools can do that part a little differently, so that's something you need to ask your teacher about.
Forgetfulness by Billy Collins. The name of the author is the first to go, followed obediently by the title, the plot, the heartbreaking conclusion, the entire novel, which suddenly becomes one that you have never read, never even heard of, as if one by one the memories you used to harbor decided to retire to the southern hemisphere of the brain, to a remote fishing village where there are no phones. Long ago, you kissed the names of the 9 muses goodbye and watched the quadratic equation pack its bag. And even now, as you memorize the order of the planets, something else is slipping away. A state flower, perhaps. The address of an uncle. The capital of Paraguay. Whatever it is you are struggling to remember, it is not poised on the tip of your tongue, or even lurking in some obscure corner of your spleen. It has drifted off down a dark, mythological river, whose name begins with an L as far as you can recall. On your own way to oblivion, where you will join those who have even forgotten how to swim and how to ride a bicycle. No wonder you rise in the middle of the night to look up the date of a famous battle in a book on war. No wonder the moon in the window seems to have drifted out of a love poem you used to know by heart.
So when the judges are watching you perform your poem, they're going to be looking for 6 specific things. First is physical presence. Your stage presence, body language, and poise. You want to be confident, make a direct connection with the audience, enjoy your poem. The judges will notice. So, as much as you can, center yourself, be ready, don't be kind of swaying and doing all kinds of crazy things unless it's called for by the poem. Anything you do with your body should be in some way helping the poem so that it's better understood. Second thing judges look for: voice and articulation. How you project your voice, and also the pacing, the rhythm, the intonation, the pronunciation. So you want to project to the audience. Speak at a natural pace. You don't want to go too fast. You don't want to, I guess, go too slow, but that almost never happens. Mostly it's going too fast, so don't do that. You want to pronounce every word in your poem. The audience and the judges have one chance to understand your poem. So you have that one chance to make sure they get every word of the poem. They don't all have, books in front of them with the poem to follow along. So with rhymed poems, be careful not to recite in a sing-songy manner. Sometimes the rhythm takes over from the poem and spins out of your control. You want to control the rhythm. You can do that however you want. One thing that I've seen people do successfully is take their poem and cut it from the web page and put it in a word processor. Take out the line breaks. So instead of a poem, it's a paragraph. And then when you go through, where do you pause or where do you emphasize things? Make your own line breaks. It's not always going to be on the rhymes. And that way, when you memorize the poem like that, it might help you kind of recite it in a way that doesn't end up being a slave to the rhythm of it. So, third thing judges are looking for: dramatic appropriateness. The interpretive and performance choices you make. A strong performance must rely on a powerful internalization of the poem rather than excessive gestures. Don't want to do that. Movement shouldn't detract or distract from the poem. Let the words of the poem do the work. Occasional gestures can certainly be appropriate, and if you're a person who talks with your hand, that makes sense. So you want to avoid a monotone delivery. You don't want to say your poems all the same. This is the sad part. This is the... No, don't do that, please. You want to talk like you're telling a story to a close friend. You bring it to life. You don't try to channel the poet or their voice. This is your voice. This is you telling this story somehow using the poet's words, but you want to put your own personality and your own voice into it. So don't over dramatize it though. So the fourth thing judges are looking for is an evidence of understanding. This is your comprehension of a poem through effective use of intonation, emphasis, tone, style of delivery. You want to understand your poem, what's going through, who the people are in it who are described, and be attentive to the messages, the meanings, the allusions, irony, tones of voice, all the little nuances. The better you know the poem and what it's about, or what you think it's about, the better you are able to tell this story to the audience. Fifth thing, overall performance. So this is about the overall success of your performance. So ask yourself, have you captivated the audience with the language of the poem? Did you bring the audience to a better understanding of the poem? That's kind of it. You're teaching this poem to the audience. You found a poem that you're interested in for some reason, the subject matter, the poet, the lines in it, and you're trying to translate that to the audience. So the last thing judges are looking for is accuracy. There's one judge whose only job is to make sure you get every word right, every line in the right order, every stanza in the right order. So they'll mark missed or incorrect words during the recitation. Accuracy is weighted pretty heavily, so make sure and practice. It's a really important part of this. So that's why you should memorize your poem so that it's as easy to deliver as your own breathing. You know it's backwards and forwards. You could deliver this poem at triple speed if you had to. Um, that's kind of will help you make sure and get it accurately out. So, remember, the Nebraska Arts Council, who puts this on, is your resource for any questions you may have about the program. They can assist you with questions about poetry out loud and can even arrange to have a visiting poet or actor lead coaching sessions or two with students. So, everybody, the main thing though is enjoy. Have fun with this program, find some poems you love, and bring those poems to life. Thanks. Cut.